to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello, and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, so please do check out the site. Lots of great information and stuff there. It is really the portal to Dr. Rita Louise and everything about her. I need to be quiet. Anyway, one very, very, very important announcement, which I forgot to make in the first hour of the show. Starting next week, Just Energy Radio is moving to its new official time, which will be Thursday evenings from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so this is our last week on Friday afternoon, and we're moving into a more prime time location. We're going to be joined by Michelle Levante and Deborah Clement, my favorite astrologers, who are going to be taking a look at what's going on for our year ahead. They're both amazing, both fabulous astrologers, and they're grounded and down to earth, and that's why I love them so much. So please do join us to find out about the year ahead. So now we're going to be talking to Betsey Lewis about her new book, Angels, Aliens, and Prophecy. The Connection. Author, clairvoyant, earthkeeper, and earth mysteries investigator, Betsey Lewis inherited the gifts of prophecy from her mother. Betsey has investigated UFOs, the cattle mutilation phenomena, angels, aliens, and other earth mysteries for over 40 years. She practices Kriya Yoga, Reiki, healing with crystals, astrology, and numerology, and has spent many years with Native American tribes throughout the Northwest in Canada, attending pow-wows, vision quests, and sweat lodge ceremonies. So from www.betsey, with a B-E-T-S-E-Y, Lewis.com, Betsey Lewis. Hey, Betsey, how are you?
Great. How are you, Dr. Rita? It's great to be on your show today.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I'm just so excited to talk to you about your book. It just seems like our backgrounds, even though they're not exactly alike, we have a lot of parallels in common, which makes it be even more fun to have someone like you on the show.
Oh, well, thank you. I felt that, too, when you were on my show.
So, yay. So I always like to start when I have a guest on for the first time, just to share some information so the listeners can get to know you a little bit. How did you get into this whole, and I like to use a much bigger name, this alternative thought area, to me, which includes, the psychic healing part and the earth mysteries and the UFOs. How did you get there?
Well, I think it goes back to my mother. I think I have a lot of her DNA because she was just really amazing. When I was growing up, we practiced telepathy with each other. She could astral project. There were times where she would be like in L.A. and people would actually see her in Idaho, and she remembered past lives. She had a lot of different thinking, and she was even in college writing a thesis about the Earth shifting its poles, which, people weren't even thinking about it then. But I think she had a great influence on me, but also we both shared in a UFO encounter in 1950 when I was only 8 months old. It was on a lonely road up in northwestern Idaho. My parents were attending the University of Moscow there, and they wanted to visit my grandparents to show me off. And they left one night. It was late afternoon, I guess, when they started out, and by the time they reached this area called the New Meadows area in northwestern Idaho, they hadn't seen a car for miles. And they thought that was a little strange, but it was late, and out of nowhere, this horrendous noise just came right on them, like they thought a plane was going to crash. That was their only thought. It was shaking the car. It was so bad. And my father the next thing he did was pull over, jump out, and look around. My mother got out. There was nothing in the sky. It just stopped. It was just gone. Well, that was the story they had told me through the years. And I didn't think much of it until my uncle in 1981 said that he had watched the amazing TV movie about the Betty and Barney Hill case, which they were abducted supposedly on a lonely road in New Hampshire in 1961 and were abducted by small gray aliens. Well, he said that reminded him of what happened to my parents because they had lost 2 hours in time they couldn't account for, just like Betty and Barney Hill. And I said, wait a minute. Where did this come from? He says, well, he remembered it so clearly that I guess my grandparents and along with my uncle had thought that my parents were in a car accident because my father always knew exactly how long it would take them to arrive in southern Idaho. So that was the first event. And my second event was in 1957. I was walking home from school, first grade, and it would take me about 10 minutes maybe to get home. It was usually a busy street, and I remember I started out on this cloudy day. There were hardly any cars, and pretty soon there were no cars, and I felt something watching me. You know how you feel when you just, like your skin starts to crawl or your hair stands on end, right? That something's watching you. Something isn't right. And before I knew it, I just saw something. I looked up, and here was this gigantic silver disc in the sky. It would grow, it would increase, it would decrease in size. It seemed to be following me no matter where I went, and I ran, I hid in some bushes, and it just didn't go away. I finally ran to a neighbor's home several blocks away. I don't know why I ran there, but the next thing I knew, as I was knocking on the door, I went inside and hid under the bed, and I don't know how long I was there. That's what I think happened. But my mother said I had been gone for like an hour, and she was really upset. She was, looking for me outside and waiting for me. She had no idea what had happened. So that was part of my early childhood. But shortly after that event happened, the second one, I began having recurring dreams, vivid dreams of earth changes over and over and over. The same dream, I would see just amazing things happening. The winds, incredible winds, I'd feel that. I would feel the earth shaking, earthquakes. I saw volcanoes erupting. And I've always felt that we are in these times. I've had many, many predictions come true about earth events throughout my life, so I feel that I'm kind of connected to the earth. But at the same time all that happened, I always felt that there was a message given to me that I was made to forget, and that, eventually I would remember when the time was right. And I know many, many abductees have had that happen. Have you heard that from other people? Maybe that
they thought they received a message or felt like they could... excuse me, I just pulled a brain dead, that they were supposed to do something, that there was a message or a thing that they were supposed to carry out because of their visitation?
Right. And I feel that what is happening now, I felt that I would see these times right now, all these strange things that are happening in our world right now. There's just so much going on, and I'm sure most of us are feeling everything is accelerating. Look at our weather. It's just crazy out there. We are having increased earthquakes all over the world. Volcano activity is increasing. Just a lot of strange things. A lot of UFO that are seen all over the world. I don't know if you've seen some of these photos that are being put up, some of these luminous disc type things, not luminous, but cylinder, is luminous. There's been a lot of orbs seen around the world. So I just feel that there's something going on, and I think 2013 is just the beginning of some of these things. How do you feel about it?
I don't know. I've been so stuck with the 2012 thing.
You stuck there?
And just, because that's really something I've been lecturing on for the last couple of years, and I just really needed it to play out. Not that I thought anything was going to happen, but I just needed it to play out. And it's done. I'm feeling like I'm ready to recreate myself again. Ooh.
Right.
But that doesn't start till next week. This week is kind of lay around the house and not do anything week.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had, or your parents had, any regression work done to help them recover memories of your experiences?
Well, yes. I contacted Bud Hopkins, who was a well-known abductee investigator in New York. He was well-known for many of his books on abduction cases. And I thought, well, maybe he could recommend someone that would regress my mom and I back to that time in 1950 to uncover what had happened. And he suggested that I contact MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, in Los Angeles, because we were living there at the time. So I contacted MUFON, and they referred me to renowned author and Earth Mysteries investigator Ann Druffel. And she was the one that regressed my mom and I. First, my mom was regressed in 1981, just, I think it was December, either November, December of 1981. I was not allowed to hear the regression because they didn't want me to be influenced by what she said. And then I was regressed separately in 1982, just a few months later. And we both, well, first my mom felt that what had happened that night, she felt extremely fearful that there was something outside the car. When my dad stopped, she kept telling him not to roll down the window, that there was something out there. And one minute she would see him outside the car, next minute he was inside. There was just a lot of strange things that she remembered. She thought she saw a plane or something in the sky, but then they never recalled anything like that, and certainly nothing. If there was a plane that was going to crash, it certainly would have been seen if it was that loud, and that, in 1950. So that was her story. But when I was regressed, I told a lot more. And of course, I was only 8 months old. You'd say, well, how can an 8-month-old baby recall something like that? But I think our subconscious recalls everything, even before we are born. In the womb, we recall that according to what scientists say. But I described us being beamed aboard a ship, and my parents were put into a tube-like structure. I felt I was being examined, and my mother kept calling out to me. It was all so clear when she was regressing me. Of course, sometimes I have to think, well, maybe I've been influenced by all the things that I've read through the years. But then I've had so many strange things happen. I feel that something did happen, which I can't explain. But all the paranormal things that have happened in my life, I just can't deny it, And I think there's a link. Both my parents, both my parents, but at least my mother and I both had the characteristics and symptoms of being abducted, the classic things that go with it, like the nosebleeds and dreams of flying, feeling paralyzed, scoop-shaped scars on our legs, the missing time, affecting electronic equipment. I'll tell you all the time, things just don't work right for me, or lights go off and on. I don't know what goes on all the time, but why, it does that, but it happens. Of course, there's fear of the dark, increased psychic ability is another classic symptom of being abducted, and probably telekinesis too, where things seem to move without anybody touching it. So I've had a lot of different things like that.
All right, I've just decided that we can be like Facebook friends, but you can't come to my house because you'll blow things up.
I know. My husband gets upset with me all the time. He says, "Oh no, now what?" You know, it's like, don't touch anything electronic. You know, stay away from it.
No kidding. Well, let's kind of shift our focus to your book. It's believed that in 1947, a UFO crashed in Roswell, New Mexico.
Right.
But does our history with extraterrestrials really start then? Or have you found that, or do you believe that it goes back much further in time?
Oh, much further. There's so much evidence that it goes back to biblical times. I think Ezekiel is one classic example of what's in the Bible, the prophet Ezekiel. And my mother even believed this. She, of course, influenced me with her belief of the aliens, contacting the prophet when, it talks about it in the Bible, and he describes a wheel within a wheel, and they're having boots that were the color of brass. He didn't say boots, but, calves' feet. He tried to describe these wheels, and the color of them was copper or beryl colored. There was fire coming out of them. That doesn't sound very angelic to me. Not what we think of angels, if they were, and so I began to wonder, how about the story of Lot and his family escaping Sodom and Gomorrah? There were a couple of men that showed up. They didn't say they were really angels, but they had a message for Lot and his wife that they had to leave the city before a certain time or they would be destroyed. They had a timeline, which is really kind of interesting. And, of course, with some of the things they described, it almost sounds like a nuclear blast. And what's really interesting is green glass, sheets of green glass have been found all over the world in major desert areas. The Gobi Desert in Mongolia. This green glass has been found in Southern California in the Mojave Desert, in Arizona, Colorado, Africa, Egypt, and in the ancient site of Babylon. But what's interesting about this green glass, there are no volcanoes around that could have created them. There's no sign of meteor impact. So what people think, or what scientists have discovered, well, it was kind of by accident. In 1945, the first atomic bomb was detonated in New Mexico desert. And what they found shortly after that was the green glass. So atomic bomb blasts can reach temperatures of several million degrees or more. So were there aliens back then detonating atomic bombs? I think so. And, of course, if you go back to ancient Indian texts, there are so many accounts of what sounds like warfare in plains, strange plains. There are paintings that go back thousands of years showing spaceships in the sky. There are wall paintings. There are cave drawings that go back that look like ancient astronauts. So there is something. There's even in Egyptian texts of pharaohs describing what sounds like aliens, ancient astronauts, and in their craft. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence that they have been around for some time.
I agree. But, for the listeners. Yeah, but many of these texts, all right, now I'm going to phrase this differently. In Christian texts, in the Bible or, in Judeo-Christianity, I'll even throw Islam in there, and this is just because I'm a little ignorant in the area. So if I'm not saying a correct statement, no mean emails. Okay. They talk about angels. I always like joking about the book of Revelation, like Michael comes with his fiery sword, and there are all these angels flying all over, and they're, fighting with each other, and they're doing all this stuff. And so when you read the Bible, there's God, and then there are these angels, and then, and I'm going to throw in the devil, because not that he's really a character per se, but he is inadvertently. How do they fit into this whole thing? I mean, do you think that there is such a thing as an angel? Or do you think really what we're talking about is some of these beings, these extraterrestrial beings?
Well, I do think that there are highly evolved entities out there that what we'd call in the angelic realm that have never had a physical body, that we see them as luminous light or as the beautiful orbs that are being seen. And they are here, they're watching us, they're guiding us. And I believe that many of the things in the Bible, like the visitations that Ezekiel had and many others, even I go back to Fatima, Portugal in 1917 with the 3 children that were given prophecies by, they thought it was the Virgin Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mary in 1917, Fatima, Portugal. And what's really interesting is that when this being, this beautiful lady would arrive, she would arrive in blue smoke. She would come in, she would glide in from the east. She would depart in the east. There were booms and strange noises that were heard every time she did come in. There were all kinds of displays of lights that she produced. There was like 3D holographic images in the sky of Jesus. One event that happened. But what was really interesting...
Wait a minute. I have to stop you right there. 3D holographic images of Jesus?
Beg your pardon?
Is that what you said? 3D holographic images of Jesus?
Well, that's what I'm thinking they were. Because they were kind of smoky looking and how people describe them, it just doesn't sound like solid people, what we would think is solid. But why all the theatrics? Why the booms? Why the lights, the smoke, the blue smoke? Why coming in from the east and exiting out to the east? Why all these things? It just didn't sound like what we would think as angelic beings, or what I would think as angelic beings. Why all the smoke and mirrors, you might say?
It makes me think of the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, well, exactly. And what's really interesting, she always came on the 13th day of the month. She did that for 6 consecutive months, and always on the 13th of the month, starting May 13th of 1917. She told the children many things that were going to happen, so she knew what was going to happen in the future. She told the 2 youngest children that they would die young, which they did. They both died from the great Spanish flu that killed 50 to 130 million people worldwide. And she told Lucia that she would live a long life, and she did. She passed away in 2005. She was a Carmelite nun and never spoke again about the prophecies, the 3 secrets that were given to them. She died on, I believe it was, It was February 13th, 2005. There's that number 13 again. There's something about 13. And I've been doing a lot of research on that, and if you'd like, we could get into that a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, most people think of 13 as it being an unlucky number.
Exactly. Well, I found it's kind of both. It's a power number, and there's a lot of interesting things about 13 that it's an esoteric number. It's dating back thousands of years in cultures throughout the world. The number 13 can be found in the Bible. Christ, of course, had 12 disciples, and he was, made the 13th. And if you go back, supposedly he was crucified on Friday the 13th, which made the day very unlucky. But it's supposed to be a number of birth, death, creative change, cleansing, purity, suffering, and the evolution of the soul, which is kind of interesting. But here's the dark part of it. The Illuminati or satanic people out there have incorporated the number 13. They have several power numbers, which is 11, 33, and 13. And it's part of their satanic background. And you can find it throughout everything that they seem to be a part of, like the dollar bill. The dollar bill, if you turn it over, there's a lot of 13 symbology. The dollar bill, there are 13 leaves on the olive branch, 13 berries, there's 13 stripes on the middle shield, there's 13 stars above the eagle's head, 13 letters, and E pluribus unum on the ribbon. There's just a lot of weird things. And I know that in Washington, D.C., our first president, George Washington, there's a rotunda there, and on the mural there is the painting of the nation's father, George Washington, surrounded by 13 maidens. So there's a lot of symbology there with 13.
And so, course, the part I always get, people bring up stuff like this, and I'm going a little off point, but then they don't really explain, I understand iconography. I understand that concept where we use things to represent something so we can easily recall the story or recall, the underlying information. But it seems like there's a certain amount that's been lost as to what the significance is of something like the number 13.
Well, what I think is we've been told, we've been warned by beings out there, dimensional beings or ETs. They've been telling us that something is going to happen either on the 13th of the month or, and since we're almost here to 2013, there's going to be a lot of things happening. And I think there's a spiritual war out there. I never would have thought that until now, but I'm beginning to see there is something going on. And I'm sure everybody is noticing all the strange things going on with our own government, with just a lot of strange things going on. The shooting in Newtown, Connecticut with the 20 children. Of course, that date, if, a lot of people are thinking there's something more to that. A lot of conspiracy theorists think that there was more to that gunman, and there was a second shooter going on. So, but the date adds up and to 13, which you could say, well, maybe that's just coincidence. But when other things start falling into place, you begin to wonder, because what I've found is just, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to go, oh, yeah, right, sure. But I've been saying this for a long time. The leaders of the world, the major leaders in our world, are not the people you think they are. And trust me, I feel it from the core of my being that these people are wolves in sheep's clothing. And they have some big plans for us that aren't the greatest things. We've got some things that are going to happen in 2013. I think it's going to come so fast and so hard, just so many things. But I think the aliens they were also warning us about an event, and maybe a solar event, because the three children were given three messages. And, of course, the Catholic Church has refused to give us the final third secret. Why? Why? Was it so horrific that they just didn't want to disclose it? What is in that message that they would not tell the world? In fact, the lady insisted that they tell the world in 1960, I think it was around 1960, and they did not, they refused to give that prediction or whatever was supposed to happen. So what is going to happen? And I don't know if you remember this part about the children. On October 13th, 1917, the children were told that there would be a miracle, and close to 30,000 people gathered in Fatima, Portugal, to witness what looked like the sun coming down out of the sky, spinning colors, incredible colors. But what they described on the day was anything but the sun. They said it resembled a plate of silver. It made strange and abrupt movements that defied the cosmic laws of, something like that. It was a clear disc. Some said that it gleamed. It was like a pearl. It had a sharp edge. It was dull silver. Does that sound like the sun coming out of the sky and doing that? It sounds to me like it was a giant UFO that they witnessed. And what's really interesting, not one astronomer around the world witnessed anything unusual about the sun on that day. Only in a 12-mile radius of Fatima, Portugal, did they see this. So were we told about some great event with our sun that's going to happen in 2013? I think so, because many people have felt that. And also, there is, NASA saying that something's going to happen. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Pretty powerful.
I mean, I know that there's a lot of stuff going on, and I personally try not to get into too much conspiracy theory personally on air, because I'm a little worried. Or at least on my own show. I'll put it out on other people's shows, but I'm sure you understand. It's like I want to live here another day. With the Fatima, weren't there pictures taken of people looking up at the sky with their mouths open going, what?
Right. In fact, it had been raining all day. They were standing in mud. And as soon as this happened at noon, exactly high noon, the rain stopped, just shut off totally. And they were all dried. The ground was dried. It was no longer muddy. They were no longer soaked. What was that, and why, just the description of what was supposed to have been the sun, that doesn't sound like the sun. So
I just think it's interesting. They got pictures of the bystanders, but no one thought to turn their camera up and take a picture of whatever it was.
Well, of course, we're talking about 1917, so I don't know. There are those.
Maybe they still had those big box cameras. That's possible.
Yeah. So was it mass hallucination? I don't know. I don't know. Or were they being warned of something that was going to happen in the future? I think they were. I really do. And I think that's part of the prophecy that's been kept from us.
So it sounds like you believe that we've been visited by extraterrestrials. Do you think they have been multiple groups of ETs? Like more than one race of ETs that have come?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's multiverses. I think these universes everywhere are just full, teeming with life in different stages of evolution. Some are so far advanced in their technology. Others are just beginning. It's everywhere. And if we think we're the only ones out here, in this whole vast cosmos, they say there's 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone. So there has to be teeming life out there that's, visiting us. So many different types of aliens. And I'm sure they don't all look like us.
Well, because there are a lot of people that say, the Anunnaki this, the Anunnaki that, as if all of these extraterrestrials were Anunnaki, unless, because the translation of it is, those who from heaven came or came down or something similar to that.
Right.
From a generic point of view, yeah, you could take every extraterrestrial and stick them in that category because they would be an extraterrestrial. Although most people like to link them with the Sumerians and the winged creatures that you see in their cosmology.
Right.
But do you think that we've been visited by more than just that group? You hear about the reptilians, you hear about, like, the Nordics. They're one of my favorite ones that I need to do some research on. Well, yeah, because, I truly believe that the biblical line that says, we were created in God's image, and they're the ones that seem clearly to have that image.
Right. Well, I think there are the grays. There are the very tiny grays that people have described that seem more robotic. And Betty, Andreas, and Luca, who had many abductions from two different types of beings. There were the elders who wore these white robes, and they seem more male. And, of course, the very small robotic aliens worked with them. And that's quite a great story. If you haven't read those, The Watchers 1 and Watchers 2 by Raymond Fowler, that's probably one of the most incredible abductions ever. And the things that she was told, much of what she was shown was as if the aliens were downloading her belief. She was a very pious woman, Christian, and a lot of the things that they showed her were of Jesus coming back. They showed her a giant image of the phoenix bird rising from its own ashes, perhaps symbolizing humanity's ability to rise from their own ashes, which is really interesting. There were many things that she was shown. She was shown that they are carrying on genetic experiments on humans because the human race will become sterile by pollution and bacteria and other terrible things on the earth.
I don't think that's going to take all that much more.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I don't think that's going to take all that much more in the direction that we're heading. There are so many women that are having reproduction issues. I almost want to think that it's at least 25% of women that are having reproduction issues that was unheard of 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, look what we're doing to the earth. I mean, there's over 7 billion people on this planet right now, and we're using up all our natural resources. Our water is becoming polluted with, there's the blue-green algae that's already going into a lot of the waterways and destroying it. It's terribly poisonous, and it's from the pesticides that are going into our waterways. We've got the fracking going on, what BP did in the deep water drilling in the Gulf. And then there was Fukushima and all the radiation, plus all the debris from the tsunami from last year's great earthquake in Japan. And a lot of these birds out there and sea creatures are swallowing all this plastic. And you know how long it takes for plastic to degrade in our world? It takes close to 500 to 1,000 years for it to degrade. So here we are. We're just destroying our earth and doing such a great job of it. I mean, it's out of control. But I think there's still time. I think we have to all awaken. We have to dream a new world into being like the indigenous people believe we can. Together with critical mass, we can change what's going on in our world. And I think there's a lot of bad things. I think there's, if you want to call them the Illuminati, the New World Order, the globalists, the elitists, they do have an agenda, and they have no concern for us or the world. And, it has to change because we can't continue this way, and we can change all that. I believe that. I don't know how you feel, Rita, but
do you think that with the New World Order and that whole area, do you think that they're under ET control? I mean, do you think that we're doing this to ourselves, or is there some outside influence that is actually driving their agenda?
Well, I think a lot of this thing, I think Earth is going through its own natural cycle, but I think they're helping to speed things up with chemtrails out there. Excuse me. With chemtrails that are going on, you see them in the sky. They started in the 1990s, and I know people go, oh, yeah, sure, they're contrails, and I'm going, no. Contrails dissipate. Contrails form at 33,000 feet, and they're from a hot engine exhaust, and the hot engine exhaust condenses into ice crystals, and then they vanish. But chemtrails last and spread out across the sky. Have you seen them through the years?
Hasn't everybody seen them through the years?
Yeah.
I mean, they're kind of hard to miss, especially when they are making this giant checkerboard pattern above your house. You know, I was listening to, I was going to Tennessee to a conference, to go speak at a conference, and I was listening to Alex Jones on the radio. This was before, like tune-in radio and, where you can listen on your phone. And and he actually was airing, because they don't air him in the Dallas area on the regular radio, but he was actually on air on the radio, so I was listening to him, and I don't remember what was going on at that point in time, but of course it was something terrible because it was Alex. And he was talking about, you're going to notice an increase of chemtrails, over the course of this weekend, over major cities. And, and I had left on like a Thursday. Well, when I was driving back that Sunday, I was driving into Memphis, I think, and it was covered. I mean, you could see them in the distance, where it was like a lattice pie shell cover just over the city. It wasn't one or two, and they weren't like disorganized. They were in these neat, like I said, it looked like a pie shell.
Now think about this. They won't tell us what's going on. They've lied to us about that. But think of the billions of dollars that must cost. And what is it? And why won't they tell us? When they keep secrets like that, you can only think of the worst and what it's doing to our world. It's going into our water, it's going into our environment, into the animals, and perhaps that's an explanation of why the bees are disappearing. I keep wondering what is going on and what for what reason. I was on a talk show about a week or so ago, and the host asked me, he says, well, chemtrails, why do you think chemtrails? What are they? It's just contrails. And I said, no, it's not. If you've watched, like you said, the patterns, the grid marks up there, the X's in the sky, and I've been watching this since the 90s and taking pictures of it. Today is a good example here in southwestern Idaho. Our skies are covered in chemtrails today. And I've noticed that since, whenever a weather front seems to be coming in, or if there's a solar event, they seem to get a lot heavier. So what are they doing, and why won't they tell us?
I mean, I just don't understand the agenda in the first place. I mean, I can, to a certain extent, I can understand the pharmaceuticals, get everybody on antidepressants, and then you can pretty much do whatever you want, and it's not going to bother you because you're, drugged up. Get everybody addicted to TV or internet or whatever, so that you're not paying attention. I get that. I totally get that. But why poison the air? Why intentionally do things? GMOs. I don't get it. Why intentionally do things that are going to harm you unless you think you are so isolated from the impact of all of this? I mean,
exactly.
It's just, I don't get it. They still have to breathe the same air.
I don't either. How can they not have any concern or regard for the earth? I mean, they have children too. Maybe they think they're going to go hide in their bunkers while all this, plays out. I don't know. You hear about all these bunkers that are being built, underground bunkers in the Ozarks. Jesse Ventura did a whole documentary on it, which you can go to the YouTube and just put in his name and see. And he did find that they are doing that. And for what reason? What do they know that is going to happen? Is it going to be a shift of the Earth's axis? You know, a lot of people are talking about Planet X. Is there a Planet X out there that's pulling on our Earth that's going to cause all this? Well, I do think there's going to be a lot of Earth changes. It's not going to be the end of the world, everybody. Don't worry. But, you know, we're going to go through a lot of changes, and a lot of weird things are going to go on with our governments and politicians. And so get ready, everybody. Trust your intuition. And instead of connecting to our electronics, connect to Earth, trust Earth and what she's going to tell you and warn you about the coming events. You know, there's always the warning.
I mean, the part that always makes me laugh, there is the Georgia Stonehenge, Georgia rocks, whatever, that talks about, you know, there's only going to be like 5 million people left on the Earth. And it makes me laugh because you know that the rich people are only going to save the rich people, and the politicians are only going to save the politicians and maybe the rich people. And my thought is, if there's only 5 million people left on the planet, who's going to get the dry cleaning, and who's going to wash the dishes, and who's going to build the fire and go do the hunting, or whatever they're planning on doing, because it's not going to be them. I just don't
said the same
understand
thing last night. I said, who is going to mow their lawns? Who is going to take care of them and be their slaves? I mean, good grief. They get rid of us.
On the last episode, they talked about the humanzees, you know, the half-man, half-ape things, which made me think about, you know, the mythology that we hear of where, you know, the gods took the bone or the blood from a giant, you know, that had passed and used that to create man, you know, and so could they be, you know, creating a new breed, a new race to become the slaves because we're basically a pain in the butt?
You know, it was about, I guess it was last year, I found this video on YouTube, and I haven't been able to find it since. But it was somewhere in Europe, this woman, did you ever see that woman that kept getting hit by cars and trucks, and she would bounce back up like there was nothing, she wasn't harmed. You know, they'd take her to the hospital. She would go right back there, like she was trying to commit suicide. And it was like she was some kind of superhuman bionic woman. It was bizarre, and it looked real. I don't know how anybody could create this, but maybe people out there can find it, but it's just bizarre. Is that something they created?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, because you also, you know, you hear about, I mean, I thought the humanity thing was interesting because I believe that that's happened in our past. But then you also hear similar stories that come out of the UFO world of, you know, them doing some kind of genetic inbreeding, creating half human, half alien hybrids as well, don't you? Right.
Well, what is the Chupacabra? You know, where did that come from? That wasn't around ages ago. It seemed to have been in just the last maybe 30 years that this creature has surfaced, and you know, people have found some kind of strange dog-type thing in Texas that they say is the Chupacabra. I don't know, but it's bizarre looking, and it doesn't quite look like a dog or a coyote. And is that something they created in their laboratories out there? I don't know. Maybe so.
Well, you know, my running joke is the Chupacabra sleeps under my desk while I'm doing the show. Looks kind of like a poodle.
A pet?
But
he's your pet Chupacabra.
I have a pet Chupacabra. That's right. She is the Just Energy Radio mascot. She wears a tinfoil hat. She's a superstar.
I love it. Oh, that's great.
You know, and would this be, you mentioned a spiritual warfare. Is this the spiritual warfare you were talking about or referring to? Or is there something yet even bigger going on that our part and the little battle planet Earth is just a small fraction of?
I think there is a spiritual war going on. You know, it's the family of dark against the family of light. And, you know, if we all wake up, you know, the thing is, I talked to Dr. Jose Arguelles, who did the Mayan factor, and the harmonic convergence before he passed away. It was in 2009 when we had this conversation. And he said the thing is, if we just don't know how to unite out there, all we do is stay polarized, and it's getting worse, because people are getting so polarized anymore that we don't agree on anything. And look at our politicians out there, Congress, how polarized that is. It's insane what's going on. So if we learn to unite, if we become one and realize that we have the power to change things, that we can do that together. I mean, I think mind is so incredible, and we just don't know the extent of our gifts, our power. We've been told that we can't do anything, that we have to look to our leaders to save us from ourselves, but I think we can do it ourselves. We have the power, and we've just forgotten who we are.
Well, but they are determined to tell us that we don't.
I know. They're doing all the fear, and they're creating all the chaos with everything. They're stirring up the pot. I just see them standing over this giant pot and just stirring it up, and they're getting everybody angry and fearful. And, we've got the fiscal cliff, that we're going to fall off, and,
Ow. Ow, my butt's hurting already.
There you go.
Betsy,
see?
we have maybe a minute or two left. If somebody wants to get your book, Angels, Aliens, and Prophecy, where can they get it?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble website. You can go to my website and click on books, which is Betseylewis.com, and it's Betsey, Betsey, Lewis, Lewis. And if they'll go there, they'll see my 2013 predictions. And I also have an Earth News 1 that they can click on that tells them all about the earthquakes going on and some of my predictions. Sometimes I just get feelings about predictions, earth changes going on, any volcanic activity, UFOs that are being seen around the world. So be sure and go there, click on Earth News 1. And also they can go to my events calendar and see where I'm going to be, what talk shows I'll be on, as well as my own talk show. So I hope they go there.
Joe, and where can people find it, or when does it air?
My talk show?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, usually on Wednesdays. I've got shows coming up through, I think, almost March now, but it's usually on Wednesdays, and it's usually in the evening. It's either 5 or 6 o'clock Mountain Time.
And the network?
It's Rainbow Visions Network.
All righty. That was what I was waiting for.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rita. It's been so much fun.
Correct. Okay, well, there's the music, which means we need to wrap up. Betsey, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and insight with my listeners.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to everybody out there.
You too, and we will talk again soon.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to